Hello, everybody. Welcome to the video on communication theory. So for this um, chapter, I am using chapter 1 out of Workplace Writing. You do not need to buy this textbook. I will just be doing video lectures on it. There are no quizzes on this material that I use from Workplace Writing. All of your quizzes are going to be using the open source textbook available to you from that's on Moodle. So as long as you read the textbook that is available to you, which is free, then you will be able to complete the quizzes that come with each week. But I don't want you to have to buy the Workplace Writing textbook. And these videos on the Workplace Writing textbook are for your own education and learning so that you can succeed in your assignments. So here is, I'm going to share my screen again, as usual. And this is going to be chapter 1 of Workplace Writing. So your objective for this particular chapter are to learn the 3 parts of successful communication: choosing the correct medium, encoding and decoding messages, message direction, the two-way process of communication, and barriers to communication. So those are the things that you should be learning in this chapter. So there's a scenario. A baby starts to cry and you are its caregiver. The baby is trying to communicate. What is the main problem with the way the baby communicates? What do you do to solve the problem? Why is this communication method not very effective? How does this scenario relate to workplace communication? So, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify all of the reasons that this scenario exists in the first place and why the problem has arisen in a communication problem between you, the caregiver, and the baby. So, ask yourself this question: what is the purpose of communication? In any scenario, there are 3 parts to a successful communication: the sender, the message, and the receiver. So you should be asking yourselves these questions. What is the task of the sender? What components should a good message have to be successful? What is the task of the receiver? So when you're thinking about this, you are the sender in this particular scenario. The message is what you want to send, and the receiver is who you are sending it to. So, some questions. What does the target audience look like? So, you are the sender. Who is the receiver? How many people is the receiver? So, questions that will arise are: what's important to my target audience? What is the message that you want to send them? Under what circumstances will the audience receive my message? So, is your receiver going to be in a circumstance that is stressful? What types of emotions will they have? Are they fairly relaxed? That type of thing. What's the message for? So, is it a workplace message? So that's an important question to ask. What knowledge level is my target audience at? So, are they an expert at the type of information you're trying to convey? Or are they a novice who you'll have to explain to an extra amount? What emotions will this message raise in my audience? Is this a message that is going to upset them or excite them? there are different ways that you will understand what's happening. So, two things that you should be able to understand. So, what is connotation versus denotation? So, denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. Connotation is the sort of emotions and what types of um, extra feelings that your words would what would arise in your receiver. So word usage is very important. So for example, I will give you two different phrases. The first one is butt dial. The second one is booty call. Butt dial and booty call both have the same denotation. The connotation is very different. For those of you who do not know what the difference is, a butt dial is when you are sitting on your phone and you accidentally call somebody. A booty call is when you are trying to have sex with somebody and you call them specifically for that purpose. You do not want to get these two things mixed up. So, what is the medium? Does anybody know what medius is Latin for? It's medium. What impacts your medium? So, some things that might impact what way you are sending your message. Location. So, where is your receiver located? Are they in the same room as you, just one desk over? Or are they across the entire world from you? So, that might impact what type of medium you use. Number of receivers. So, how many people are getting this message? Is it just one person? Or is it 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000? There could be an endless amount of people that could be receiving your message depending on what it is and what it's for. So, urgency. Is it very urgent? Is there an emergency of some kind? Or could they get to it next week and it wouldn't matter too much? Sensitivity. So, who is it for and why is it being sent? So, is it for some one person's eyes only, or is anybody allowed to see it? Availability of equipment. So, do you just need the stapler on the desk next to your coworker, or are you trying to get some expensive equipment from across the country? Length. So, are you trying to send a quick text message to your coworker asking when you're on the roster next? Or are you trying to get a final report sent to somebody? The nature. What is the message about? Um, do you need um, to use a different medium because it's a different type of message? And need for a permanent record of the message. If this is a phone call, will you remember everything that's been said in the phone call? Or would an email be better because you need to remember what was said? Or possibly, do you need to have proof that something was sent? So that's a good question to ask yourself. So, choosing a medium. Scenario one, you are the coach of a soccer team and you want to discuss strategy with your players. How do you do it? Scenario two, you are the coach of a figure skater trying to figure out practice dates. How do you figure that out? Scenario three, you are a tutor with several different students, each with different needs and different learning styles. One is an older ESL learner from Syria, one is a high school student studying grade 10 English, and one is a college student. Scenario four, you are the manager of a medium-sized company. There has been an issue with workplace harassment. You need to hold a meeting about this issue immediately. So, all of these scenarios are different. What kind of medium would you use in each of these scenarios? The answer to each of these scenarios is not necessarily only one answer. So you might want to think about it and decide what kind of medium is best for each of these situations. Encoding. So this is how you send your message. Everything is encoded. So I'm not talking about a super spy sort of situation. This is just putting it in a form that will be understood by the receiver. So for example, if you have workplace jargon that you use, or specific situations that you might be talking about that other people wouldn't understand, but your receiver would. For example, say you are a lawyer and you want to talk about a certain file to your assistant, you would have a specific way of talking about this file that would be understood by your assistant, but might not necessarily be understood by anybody else. The same message can be encoded differently for different audiences. So, say you are the same lawyer and you want to send the same message to your assistant, a different lawyer, and possibly a social worker. There are different ways of encoding your message so each person will understand what you want to say. Then there's direction. So, are you sending the message in an upward direction, a lateral or horizontal direction, or a downward direction? So, for example, you are a mid-level manager at a company. You have upward direction, which is to people who are above you in the company, such as the CEO. The lateral, who are peers of yours who are at the same level as you, and downward to people under your management. So, another scenario. You have to ask your senior manager about the work schedule. It hasn't been posted yet, but it was supposed to be up yesterday. You want to plan an event, but you don't know what days you have off yet. What do you do? Second scenario. You have to ask your coworker about a report that he wrote. The meaning wasn't clear and you need the information for your own project as soon as possible. What do you do? You're the senior manager and you have to ask an employee if she will work on her day off because one of the other employees is ill. What do you say? So each of these scenarios, you are going to use different wording for each. So for example, would you order the senior manager for the work schedule, or would you ask the senior manager for the work schedule? What about your coworker? What about the employee? And it also depends on what the message is. So, for example, if you're asking the employee if she will work on her day off, what kind of wording will you use? So, decoding. Decoding is sort of the opposite end of encoding. So, encoding, we were the messenger and we were sending the message to a receiver. And now decoding is on the other end, the receiver who is getting the message from the sender. So um, you want to be able to not just hear or receive a message, but also understand what it means. For example, the instructor may tell the whole class the same information, but each student may interpret this info differently. So I may, for example, tell you about an assignment that you have to do, and you may think one thing about the assignment, while another student may interpret the same information differently. If I stand a block away from you and wave my arms at you, what am I trying to say? It can mean anything depending on how you interpret what it is I am saying. It could be a simple hello, or I could be warning you about an approaching car. So, decoding is just as important as encoding. So, there's a two-way process for communication. So this is where we use some analogies such as the ball is in your court. So once you send a message, it is like a tennis game. You have somebody sending the message. The message is the ball in this scenario, and then the other person will um, you will serve it. The ball will bounce, and then the other person will have to. Uh, I'm not very good at tennis. Um, Hit the ball back. So, example: you, the sender, hands in an assignment, the message, to the instructor, the receiver, and you expect you will get an A on the assignment, which is the anticipated feedback. However, when you get the assignment back, you instead get a C minus, which is the actual feedback. What could be the problem with what you expected versus what actually happened? So, anticipated feedback, as you can sort of see in this scenario, is what you expect. The actual feedback is what actually happens. In the best case scenario, the anticipated feedback and the actual feedback are the same. However, quite often, anticipated feedback and actual feedback are different. So, how do you figure out what went wrong? So, there are barriers to communication. What do you think a barrier does? What kinds of barriers might there be in communication? For example, the room we were in was too hot. The result is I didn't hear the date of the next meeting and missed it. So, the barrier was environmental because the room was too hot. Uh, there's a second example. The report was very confusing. So, the report you wrote was very confusing. So, as a result, the manager didn't bother to read the report because it was confusing. The employee, you, who wrote it, missed a chance for promotion. So, this barrier is cognitive. Third example, the customer spoke too quietly. Result, the bank teller performed the wrong procedure. The customer became angry. So, some of the barriers that you might encounter in this situation are environmental, cognitive, and physical. Example, I had a fight with my parents the night before an important work meeting. Result, I attended the meeting but didn't perform adequately. I received a write up. The barrier is emotional. Last ones. Example, I didn't sleep the night before an exam. Result, I failed the exam. I didn't get into the university I wanted. Barrier is physical. Example, the print in the catalog was too hard to read. I spelt the first two wrong, I'm sorry. Result, sales were low. The barrier is technical. So, after listening to this presentation, what are the three parts of successful communication? Do you remember what they are? How do you know if you have chosen the correct medium for a message? Think back to the scenarios that I gave you. Do you know how to communicate with the people that were in those scenarios? Why is it important to know whether the direction of a message is upward, downward, or lateral? If your anticipated feedback is different from your actual feedback, what could the problem be? If you are trying to communicate with your supervisor and there is bad reception on their end, what is the communication barrier? So, those are some of the questions that you should be able to answer by the end of this presentation. Thank you for listening, and if you need to, you can watch this presentation over again and try to figure out what it is you missed the first time around. Example, this video is a form of communication. I am the sender. This video is the message. You are the receiver. Are there problems with this video that need to be rectified in order for you to understand it? let me know in the comments. Have a good day.